NovaCare soap opera plays on as the head coach attempts to reprove himself. And an old hand is brought in to run the defense. Sal Paolantonio and Tim McManus join me tonight to talk about Eagles management, Detroit, San Francisco, Kansas City, Baltimore, and where is one Bill Belichick going in 2024. Sean Green joins me at the bottom of the hour to talk picks, props for championship weekend. That is all right now on a championship edition of This Week in Pro Football.
It's time for This Week in Pro Football, a deep dive into the key issues and marquee matchups in the National Football League. For the next 60 minutes, we invite you to sit back or lean in with host Pat Callahan as we preview the week's Eagles matchup, big games, breaking stories, and all news NFL. It's This Week in Pro Football, right now on JAKIB Media Sports.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the championship edition of This Week in Pro Football. Pat Callahan joining you. We're on JAKIB Sports. Give me a follow on X at TWIPF Pat. You can follow the network at JAKIB Sports. It's a fascinating time here in Philadelphia as the Philadelphia Eagles coming off as everybody knows, a disastrous finish to the regular season and a very early playoff exit. Held a rather a tense press conference earlier this week with Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman. We'll talk to Sal Paolantonio and Tim McManus at length about what that press conference told us and the direction of the Eagles going forward and who is pulling what strings. Fascinating stuff from two senior guys whose thumb is right on the pulse of what the Eagles are doing. So look forward to that. Detroit, San Francisco, and Kansas City, Baltimore round out now your championship week. Xander, if you want to bring that up, let's take a quick look at how we got here. We got here through Kansas City last week, holding off Buffalo 27-24, another wide right for the Bills. The Bills got some real work to do now. Their window might be closing a little bit, very aging defense, and a quarterback who's excellent, but he's there 7 years now, and the Bills have no Super Bowl appearances to show for it. Kansas City and Mahomes and Reed, just unbelievable. They just do what they got to do. They win games. Talk to Sal Paolantonio, who's going to cover that game about the legacy of Lamar Jackson. This is a big game for Lamar. I mean, big. For Mahomes, it's almost just another Sunday in January. But I think that could be a very, very good game on Sunday. Detroit outlast Tampa Bay 31-23. And the Detroit Lions are in the NFC Championship game against San Francisco, which escaped a win over Green Bay. San Francisco did not look that good. They lost Deebo Samuel. And for all the talk about Brock Purdy, I don't know. But my feeling is the 49ers will have worked out the jitters and the kinks last week. I think it's going to be a very tough game for Detroit. Jared Goff has to seriously outplay Brock Purdy in order for the Lions to have a chance to win that game. All right, so that's where the championship weekend stands. We're also going to talk with in the next hour about the coaching carousel. In case you didn't hear, Raheem Morris, the Rams defensive coordinator, is the new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. So the 7 coaching openings, now 5 are filled. The only 2 coaching openings left now are Washington and Seattle. So it'll be very interesting to see. There's a couple of heavyweight head coaches out there, Mike Vrabel and a guy named Belichick, who have not gotten head coaching jobs. And I think it speaks a little bit to what's going on in the NFL, especially with Belichick. Does anybody really want that much baggage in their front office? Because more than often, he's going to be right and you're going to be wrong. It's going to be hard to he's going to be a big presence, and somebody's got to be awful strong in their conviction to hire. And I think that's what you're seeing now. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Sal Paolantonio coming on in just a couple of minutes. The Eagles situation here warrants a lot of talk. Philadelphia hiring Vic Fangio this week to be their defensive coordinator. I'm not ecstatic over that hire. I think it's just to me, it's just a name. It's a name. And these guys just seem to bandy about, bounce back and forth between teams. But when you look at their record, I don't know. But Fangio joins now Philadelphia. And the real question will be on the offensive side. Who's going to be the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles? Because as we'll talk with Sal, we'll talk with Tim, what role is Nick Sirianni going to play here? I don't suspect he's going to be leaning over the shoulder of Vic Fangio very much. And the question is, who will be calling the plays and who will be running that offense, which we all know, and Sirianni himself admitted had gotten very stale. And, of course, there's a relationship with one Jalen Hurts. He's not going anywhere. $50 million cap hits the next couple of years. So Jalen Hurts is there to stay. And it doesn't remind you a little bit of Carson Wentz. And now you're hearing some undertones of problems between Hurts and Brian Johnson, the outgoing offensive coordinator. And you say to yourself now, where have I heard this before? So we'll try and get to the bottom of that with these two gentlemen, too, in the next hour and a half. We look forward to you hanging out with us throughout. Xander, why don't we get this gentleman on here, the host of the NFL Matchup Show, ESPN correspondent, and a guy who's been, I think you're going to be covering a heck of a game Sunday in Baltimore, and that's Sal Paolantonio. Sal, how are you today?
It has been high drama in Philadelphia with the Eagles over the last couple of weeks. I've never seen anything like it. I've covered this team since 1993. My first day on the job, covering the team for the Philadelphia Eagles was about Reggie White, the first player to file for free agency in NFL history. I covered Bremen selling the team to Lurie, the firing of Rhodes, the firing of Kotite, Andy Reid, the suspension of T.O. And I can tell you, I've never seen anything like this. The amount of attention that has been paid to this football team in the last couple of weeks has literally been historic, without a doubt.
Yeah. I guess it's going to continue, Sal. I was talking about just a minute ago about the offensive coordinator position, but let me start with this with you. The Eagles hire Vic Fangio as their DC. Give me your comments on that, Sal. Does that register with you in any type of significant way?
Well, it's the easy way out. They tried to hire Vic Fangio. They were talking to him about replacing Jonathan Gannon, and Fangio didn't want to wait. And Gannon left, and Fangio's had already committed to the Miami Dolphins. And Fangio only lasted 1 year there.
Yeah.
And if you look at the profile, Sean Desai is a disciple of Vic Fangio. They run the same kind of defense. Just look at the blitz numbers, 21% blitz percentage rate, identical for both teams in 2023. The number of touchdown passes given up, both in the bottom 5 of the National Football League. These defenses are great when you have great players. That's what Rex Ryan always said about the Vic Fangio defense. Vic Fangio has an under 500 record. And if truth be told, at the press conference, it was all about fresh ideas. Yeah. Let's bring in fresh ideas. Maybe they were only talking about the offense.
That's an excellent point. You're exact. 177 and 191, Sal, 23 seasons. And according to Pro Football Reference, all of his percentiles, meaning how he came in relative to his peers throughout his career, he's all right around 50%. So he's just right in the middle of the pack in his ability to limit offensive yardage, limit offensive touchdowns. So I just think it was a name hired by the Eagles. I don't think it's anything special at all.
Well, no, it's not. Vic Fangio does have a name, but so does Ron Rivera, and so does the young Mike Caldwell. Both of those defensive coordinators and former head coach Ron Rivera failed where they were because they didn't have the players that they needed. In the case of Caldwell, it just kind of evaporated due to injuries, and Rivera, they traded away the team. They were selling the team, and he got caught in the switches. And the bottom line is they wanted Fangio, and they had to settle for Sean Desai, and now they have Fangio. But here's the bottom line, Pat. You have a head coach, and you're going to have Tim McManus on later, and it was Tim who asked the question in the press conference, and I want to hear Tim's insight and perspective. Nobody covers the team better than Tim McManus. I'm looking forward to him being on your show later. Mm-hmm. He's in the 4th year of a 5-year deal. So who was he really going to attract to Philadelphia as a coordinator, knowing that he really is on the clock? Right. Brian Daboll's on the clock at the Giants. Mike McCarthy's on the clock with the Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
And now Nick Sirianni. 3 of the 4 guys, and you have a new head coach in Washington. We don't know who that's going to be. The whole NFC East, in terms of the head coaching position, is in complete upheaval, top to bottom, all 4 teams.
Well, you are right. You are right. And the upheaval here, you mentioned at the top of the show, substantial. You mentioned how tense that press conference was. Jeff McClain put out on X, Sal, that he's saying that Nick Sirianni reports to Jeff Lurie. He does not report to Howie Roseman. How common, if that's the case, how common is that in the NFL? And how awkward is that for Howie Roseman?
Well, that's an interesting dynamic. I think the bottom line is that a lot of what goes on in the Philadelphia Eagles, there are a lot of conversations between the owner's son, Julian Lurie, who's basically the head of a lot of the statistical and analytical parts of the team, Howie Roseman, who has ultimate authority over the roster, as far as I can tell, as the general manager and executive vice president of the team. So, they talk to one another about the direction of the team, but they were sitting very far apart from one another. And at one point, Howie Roseman asked Nick Sirianni if he could interject. I don't want to read too much into body language because then you get into trouble. Jeff's a good reporter. I trust what he's reporting.
Right.
But the bottom line is this, if you're Howie Roseman and your team tanked the way it did and you had some major personnel issues, you have to wonder about Howie Roseman. You have to wonder. I mean, it was Lane Johnson who said in that locker room after the Bucs game at Raymond James Stadium, quote, "No one is safe." And I believe that's true.
All right. Listen, we get back with Sal Paolantonio. Sirianni made a notable comment about having to, quote, reprove himself, unquote. I'm going to ask Sal, to whom was Sirianni referring in terms of reproving himself? Was it the fans? Was it the players? Was it the owner? We'll do that with Sal Paolantonio as we talk more Eagles here on a championship edition of This Week in Pro Football.
Celebrate your victories in style at Spring Mill Country Club. From Eagles wins to baby showers, weddings to birthdays, our picturesque venue is ready to host your special events. Make memories that last a lifetime in our stunning surroundings. Call Spring Mill today at 215-675-6000 and elevate your next event to unforgettable heights. Contact us now to book 215-675-6000.
John Kennedy Ford. Their reputation sounded too good to be true, so my partner and I decided to do a little digging.
They know we can see them, right?
We could get them a great deal if they just come inside.
They made us. Run! Uncovering a better car buying experience is easy at John Kennedy Ford. Enjoy your ride.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Welcome back. This week in Pro Football, Pat Callahan here, joined by the great Sal Paolantonio, who will be covering for ESPN the AFC Championship game between Kansas City and Baltimore. And don't forget to check out the matchup show Saturday and Sunday on ESPN. All right, Sal, I mentioned before the break about Sirianni making that remark that he's out to, quote, reprove himself. In your opinion, who's he reproving himself to? Is it the owner? Is it the players? Or is it the people in the city, many of whom are calling for his dismissal?
Well, if you read his comments and listen to what he said, I think he was talking about the owner. I think he was talking about the organization. Right. I don't feel that he really believes that he has to reprove himself to his players. There's a lot of people who suggest that Sirianni, quote unquote, lost the locker room. I do not believe that one bit. There may be some players who may be unhappy with the direction of the team. That's normal, but I don't think he, quote unquote, lost the locker room. So I don't think that's the case. He definitely has to reprove himself with the fan base everywhere I go. Anecdotally, it's pretty clear. And when you listen to sports talk radio in Philadelphia, it's very clear that people were ready to move in a new direction. And they did not like what happened at the end of the season. And getting back to the whole Roseman dynamic, it was Howie Roseman that kept reminding the microphone as he was talking into it that it was unacceptable. The end of the season was unacceptable. Yes, we had all of those wins, 36-5, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mitigate one bit what happened at the end of the season. And that was pretty clear, a condemnation of the direction of the football team. It really doesn't matter who, in my opinion, reports to whom. And the bottom line is that it's Jeffrey Lurie's team.
Right.
And as far as I can tell, in the 31 years that I've covered this team and covered specifically Jeffrey Lurie since he bought it in 1995, it's always been his decision to fire. It was his decision to fire Kotite like that and Ray Rhodes like that. It was his decision to hold on to Andy Reid. His relationship with Andy Reid was very close, even when it soured with members of the front office. So the coach always reports to the owner because it's the coach who's hired by the owner and the owner who pays his checks and pays his salary. That's throughout the National Football League. Bill Belichick never reported to Nick Caserio or Jonathan Gannon. He reported to Robert Kraft.
Right.
Tom Coughlin always reported to John Mara and Steve Tisch. That's always been the case in the National Football League. You work as the head coach for the owner, but you also work for the fans. It's very hard to coach an NFL team. Everybody will tell you if you lose the fan base.
Yeah, especially in this town, right, Sal? I mean, if you lose the Arizona Cardinals fan base, you could end up coaching forever. If you lose the Eagle fan base, you've got a problem. I mean,
well, people are paying attention here like no other city in the world. I said it. You wake up, you take care of your family, you go to work, and then you follow what's going on with the Eagles. That's it. Those are, and maybe some people reverse it. So it's a huge deal in this town. Just look at the number of people who were watching that press conference. I mean, it would make Cecil B. DeMille blush how many people were watching that press conference yesterday.
All right, Sal, everybody's been talking about the 1-6 finish and how desultory the offense really was and just how it got just so stale. And, of course, no A.J. Brown in the playoffs. Okay, fine. But even before that, it just became shockingly predictable.
Yep.
Now the Eagles got to hire an offensive coordinator, and he's got to be a good one, I think. I mean, I think for Nick's sake, he better be a good one. But as you mentioned, there's some serious obstacles here, right? The short shelf life of his contract, the fact that it's late in the cycle. How do you see the Eagles getting this job filled?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I think, all right? This offensive coordinator has to have snap, crackle, pop. He's got to be willing to challenge the head coach and the quarterback with an approach and new ideas that's going to shake things up and quickly. That's the bottom line. And Nick Sirianni alluded to that. He's looking for fresh ideas. Well, I think the one guy is sitting right there, and they have shown an interest in him, and that's Cliff Kingsbury. I may be in the minority about that, but to me, I'd rather have that than a recycled Chargers or Dallas offensive coordinator or somebody who was a quarterback's coach who's never called plays before. Cliff Kingsbury has had success with a dual-threat quarterback, and he knows the college game. He can reach back and get college players to infuse things in what's going on with the Philadelphia Eagles and especially reach. But Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni have to be willing to be challenged by a guy with a fresh idea and a fresh approach.
Yeah. Sal, I made the analogy, Sal, in the open about Jalen Hurts and to maybe Carson Wentz. And you remember how that fell apart a year after Wentz's injury when he was almost MVP, and then all of a sudden, all you heard about was the problems he was having with the offensive coordinator, and he just wasn't listening. Do you see any of that with Jalen Hurts? He's so quiet. He's just so reserved. I mean, how do you see through the inscrutable nature of this guy and as to how coachable he is?
Pat, that's a TED Talk. That's something where, you're going to have a round table of people. I think the bottom line is you have to just look at the results and you have to look at the offense. And let's look at the offense. They had the fewest pre-snap motion plays in the National Football League. That's generic vanilla. Right. Did not challenge. As Rex Ryan said on our air, as Brian Baldinger has said many times on his breakdowns, they don't challenge the defense mentally, pre-snap or post-snap. 2, Jalen Hurts at the end of the season was the most blitz quarterback in the National Football League.
You've been saying that for weeks. I mean, for weeks we've been talking about that on the show. So you're right.
And okay, so where was the answer?
That's right. No answer.
Where was the answer? So I don't coach the game. I've observed the game for a long period of time, and I talk to experts who have observed the game.
Right.
And so I'm sitting in Todd Bowles' office after the wild card game, and he was just giddy about how his blitz worked on just about every play, whether the Eagles were throwing it or running it. And he said to me, as soon as Jalen Hurts evacuated the pocket after one read on the blitz, he knew that they had him and they could continue to blitz him because they didn't have an answer.
Boy.
And this is a wild card game in which he gave up a safety in a playoff game that should never have happened. So he needs help. He's definitely repairable, in my opinion. He has obviously MVP level talent, and he needs somebody to challenge him. Nick Sirianni needs somebody to challenge him. And of all those out there, I think right now that people are talking about, I think Cliff Kingsbury would be the guy.
That's not a bad idea at all because he does have the panache. He's been through the grinder, if you will. And so, I mean, he's not going to be easily faced. I think it's a very good point. All right, listen, Sal Paolantonio, how about we do a little lightning round here?
Okay.
I want to ask, first I'm going to give you some names. One last Eagle point here, free agents. Do you see any impetus amongst the Eagles to bring back first DeAndre Swift?
Well, that's a good question, Pat. We're not even there yet. You got to figure out who the offensive coordinator is. I think the number one thing that we have to concern ourselves with is Jason Kelce. Who's going to play center and who's going to call the protections and what kind of offense? How are they going to run it? Are they going to run this offense bang, bang, machine gun style with Chip Kelly in mind? Are they going to run it with a lot of pre-snap motion like the Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur offense that's in vogue right now in the National Football League? The center is going to make this thing go with the quarterback. DeAndre Swift is, way down the list of concerns as far as I'm concerned.
It's funny you mentioned those offenses. They're all heavy pre-snap motion offenses.
Oh, yeah.
You just mentioned to them. All right. How about now we look around here? It's championship weeks, Sal. I posited at the start of the show that in order for Detroit to have a shot against San Francisco, I think the 49ers got scared last week. I think they'll be much better. And I think Jared Goff has to seriously outplay Brock Purdy. How do you see this one?
Well, Jared Goff is outplaying Brock Purdy right now. I mean, the way if you look at him on film, he's an extremely confident quarterback in a very well-designed offense, and he has got options all over the football field. He's got a speedy wide receiver who never drops the ball. He's got a rookie tight end who always seems to be open. They have designs that get guys open. The ball's coming out quickly. His offensive line has been manhandling everything that everybody has thrown at them. And they have two exciting running backs, one of whom can score from anywhere on the field. So a rookie, Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think right now, considering the way Brock Purdy's playing and considering that Deebo Samuel is maybe not 100%, the way the Niners win the game is give it to Christian McCaffrey and keep Detroit off the field, run the ball on the Lions. That's what you have to do. I mean, McCaffrey reminds me of a cross between Roger Craig and Edwin Moses. Sometimes he is leaping over players, and sometimes he's just churning his arms right through the defense. I think you got to just get on that train of the factor back and ride it to the Super Bowl.
All right. I'll say this to you, Sal. I think there's a home Jared Goff and there's an away Jared Goff. And away Jared Goff is not half as good as home Jared Goff.
All right.
That's what I mentioned. I'll believe it when I see it. If he can get this.
Pat, let me just tell you this. If the Lions go to the Super Bowl, I'm going to bring something back from our past. When you and I were on the radio together and I would cover Lions and Packers, the Lions training staff gave me blue socks, if you remember.
I do remember that. I
still have those blue thermal socks.
I'm so glad you haven't had the.
I still have them. I don't know if I'll need them in Las Vegas, but I will bring them, and I will take a picture of me in those blue socks if the Lions play in the Super Bowl.
All right. Now, the game you're covering Sunday, I think it's a close game. I know you mentioned that the line's going up. I don't see how that is. I don't see how you in any way diminish the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid about to become, if he pulls it off, only the fourth head coach to go to 5 Super Bowls.
4, 5. Yeah.
And that's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy what this guy's accomplished. And he's got the best quarterback in the last 20 years. This guy is just absolutely inscrutable. You can't flap. You cannot phase this guy in any way. Talking about Patty Mahomes. How do you see this one playing?
Well, again, we could have a TED talk on it, but since it's a lightning round, I'm just going to go back to what you said. Patrick Mahomes II has no interceptions in his last 5 playoff games, and he's won all 5.
Yeah.
He is like a point guard in the NCAA tournament who doesn't turn the ball over, gets the ball to his playmakers, and lets them shoot the shot.
Yeah.
And if Lamar Jackson turns the ball over, the Chiefs are going to win. That's it.
Yeah.
If he doesn't turn the ball over, the Ravens will win. They have enough on defense to win the game. That's it. That's the game right there.
All right. Excellent. I appreciate that. One last thing I want to hit you with, Sal Pao. We are down to 2 head coaching openings right now, Washington and Seattle. There is a certain guy named Belichick who at the outset of this process was thought to be the golden boy hire for all these head coaching openings. It looked like Atlanta. Atlanta just hired Raheem Morris now as their head coach. What do you think is the dynamic here as to why no one has made any real serious overtures to Bill Belichick?
That is going to be something we're going to have to report out. So I'll give you some theories as to why. And I really have nothing to back it up because it's not something that I have reported because I've been involved in the Eagles game, the Eagles situation, and covering the Ravens down the stretch here. So I haven't made the kind of phone calls that will give you detailed insight. But what I am hearing is that Belichick really wants to break Shula's record. Mm-hmm. And so what you're buying when you're bringing Belichick in is a short shelf life.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. He wants to beat the record, and he wants to do it quickly and in a dignified way at a dignified place.
Right.
That's 1. 2, he has run his whole show, his entire career, picked the groceries, went shopping, and cooked up the meal, as Parcells once said.
Right.
Does he want to share that with Rich McKay in Atlanta or with a new general manager and president in Washington and a new owner that wants to go in a new direction? Right. And can he win quickly in Washington, or could he win quickly in Atlanta? Where the quarterback situations are,
Yeah, correct. Very dicey.
Dicey.
Right. You are correct. Yeah.
So I would say I would say something's going to happen. I don't know what it is, but there's going to be some surprise because Belichick has never been left standing when the music stops.
Yeah. Very interesting. It's been surprising so far, but you're right about that. But he has never been, and you wouldn't think he would be this time. But I think your point about the record, Shula's record, that's like 1.5 years, Sal. Maybe 2 years. 2 years he breaks it, and then I think you're right. And then an owner's going to be left standing there when he retires. So it's clearly something I think is in the way.
And what if he doesn't break it in 2 years? What if it goes 3 or 4? And then what are you doing?
Right,
You're
exactly.
not building your team, and he's not breaking the record.
All right, Sal Pal, appreciate it very much. The matchup show this week, I'm sure, focuses on these the two conference championship games. You got a lot of material you can look at for that AFC game.
Oh, yeah. We got the matchup show Sunday morning, Championship Sunday, with the great Greg Cosell and Darius Butler. And I will be back right here on this program, and we'll talk about the Super Bowl and maybe some Eagles hires. We'll see.
Right, we'll see. Hopefully we do. Sal, I appreciate it very much. It was a great segment. Thank you. Have a safe trip to the Queen City. We'll talk to you, the Charm City. Listen to me, the Charm City. We'll do that next week, all right?
All right, Pat.
All right, great Sal Paolantonio. Thank you very much, Sal. When we get back, Sean Green's going to join me. We're going to talk picks and props. We're going to talk, we'll get a Vegas opinion on what's going on down at NovaCare. That's all next. The championship edition of This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.
Discover the essence of true community banking with First Bank, your trusted partner across eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Their network of branches brings you convenient access to dedicated personal bankers who understand your unique needs. At First Bank, you're not just a customer, you're a valued member of the community. But that's not all. They are excited to join forces with another pillar of the community banking world in eastern Pennsylvania, Malvern Bank. Their team of professionals will fit seamlessly into First Bank's culture of dedication and understanding your financial aspirations to fuel your success. With a deep-rooted commitment to Eastern Pennsylvania, Malvern Bank stands as a testament to community values and unwavering support. Experience the difference of real relationships and dedicated personal bankers. Connect with any member of the team today at our Westchester office, conveniently located at 849 Paoli Pike, or you can call them directly at 484-881-3800. First Bank is an equal opportunity lender and member FDIC. At Whistler Pearlstein LLP, we assemble the most effective team to handle all of your legal needs. There are players and pretenders, but our hustle and heart set us apart. In practice now for over 75 years, we're proud to be one of the most prominent full-service law firms in the Philadelphia region. We offer 17 different areas of practice, including business, corporate, and tax education law, real estate, zoning, and land development, municipal law, and litigation. Our top-rated attorneys and staff are laser-focused on client success. We strive to provide outstanding legal counsel with the highest level of care and consideration. Let us show you the Whistler way. Learn more at WhistlerPearlstein.com or email Michael J. O'Donohue at mod@WhisPearl.com. WhistlerPearlstein.com or mod@WhisPearl.com.
I want to be a game changer in construction. I want to be able to provide diversity in the workforce, and it starts at the top. I started Rodriguez Construction Group in 2013 with 2 employees, and we're 85 strong today. M&T has been a great partner since day one, providing us the access, the opportunity, the funding to be able to continue our growth. We can change the community in a positive way, one person at a time, one job at a time, and one family at a time. I think M&T Bank is very committed to the community, just like us.
Back this week in Pro Football here on JAKIB Sports. An old familiar name to Philadelphia, Zach Ertz just signed with the Detroit Lions. So you might see Zach out there maybe filling in a little bit for Sam Laporta or maybe a 2 tight end setup for Detroit. They love to run the ball. So maybe something to watch for come Sunday afternoon. And then the other thing, too, strikes me. I mentioned how Andy Reid could be only the 4th head coach to reach 5 Super Bowls. The other 3, Don Shula, Tom Landry, Bill Belichick. That is select company for anybody. And it's funny, we don't really look upon Reid that way. Let's bring Sean Green on here from the Sports Gambling Podcast. Sean, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Yeah. Conference championships, not too far from the Super Bowl. Time flies.
Do you think sometimes we're talking about Coach Reed and we don't really take him that seriously because he looks like a giant picture of Hawaiian Punch in that red outfit, and maybe sometimes we kind of like look, oh man, that's like he's like John Candy with a mustache. This guy is a serious NFL head coach, isn't he?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, if they especially. He's already up there in the pantheon of all-time great coaches. But then imagine if the Chiefs win this one. You got to have like a legacy conversation. I don't think he's quite there with Belichick, but certainly some of these other guys. I mean, even the years where they didn't win Super Bowls. I mean, look at his win-loss record in Philly. The conference championships. He's been to a number of them. He's won a number of them. So yeah, I think you really have to have like some conversations. Just his winning seasons is pretty crazy. So yeah, I think he's kind of a big goofball at times, and maybe that you don't take him as seriously. But I think especially after he retires, there's rumors he might retire this season, which I wouldn't retire until Patrick Mahomes retires if I was him. But I think after he's gone, people will kind of celebrate him a little bit more.
It's a good point you make. And you just wonder if he retires and the Chiefs bring in Harvey Lipschitz to coach the team and they go 13-4, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's going to look and say, oh, what did Reed have to do with it, right? But you can't argue. You just, at some point, like Bill Parcells always said, you're one what your record says you are. This guy has had one hell of a run as a head coach in the NFL. All right, let's get to the other game, though, Sean. I'm going to start with that one. Detroit at San Francisco. Now, Sal was a little circumspect at thinking that Detroit could push San Francisco in this game. Here's my theory. I think the whole weekend's going to be chalk. I said it's going to be a chalk Super Bowl, but I think the 49ers got scared. They had the hell scared out of them last week against Green Bay. Packers really could have either won the game, at least could have forced it overtime. I think the Niners got a good wake-up call there, and I don't trust road Jared Goff. Do not. Is that why this line is still a touchdown?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. Everyone is, or at least like the power rankings, all that kind of stuff definitely favor the 49ers, but I would lean more towards Sal. Now, some of this is probably my heart because I do hate this 49ers team. But I look at the past two home games with Brock Purdy, and you want to talk about not trusting. In some ways, I almost trust Jared Goff more than I trust Brock Purdy right now. He did not look comfortable at all in that win. Now, granted, they did get that game-winning drive, so hats off to him, but I don't think he looked very comfortable. Now, some of it was the weather, but then let's look at the home game before that. The Baltimore Ravens just put it on him. So I think Purdy throws some interceptable passes, and if Green Bay converts on one of those last week, I think they get the victory. So to me, it's going to come down to that. Can Hutchinson get a strip sack, and can they convert on one of these interceptable passes? I think if they can, I think they're a live dog, but especially if you can get those 7.5s, I think that's interesting to me. And I think there are some opportunities to run the ball against the 49ers. You saw that with Aaron Jones. So I would lean towards taking the points, but again, I'm pretty biased against this 49ers team.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I always talk, Sean, about psychology, even though what you just said makes eminent sense, but the psychology to me is the 49ers to a man must have thought, oh, my God, that we dodged a serious bullet last week. And I think there'll be a hell of a lot more focus. But the other thing I think weighs even more, Sean, I don't trust this guy. I've been a Ram fan forever. I've watched Jared Goff since the Rams traded up to get him. And sometimes he is out and out terrific. And other times he looks like somebody just handed him a ball.
Yeah.
And this crucible on the road, I'll have to believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what he has going for him is he is from the Bay Area. The 4 times he's played in San Francisco, you look at his stats. I mean, 2-2 straight up, but the touchdown to interception. He's only been sacked once in 4 games at San Francisco, so he's kind of shown up there. And then even if you remember that playoff game where he wasn't supposed to play because of his broken thumb, then they ended up bringing him in the game. Like, I'm with you. Jared Goff is a tough guy to get a read on because I've made fun of him and faded him a bunch. And then he's also had moments where he's looked good or competent. I think
you probably remember, Sean, or you might remember that NFC Championship game. The Rams were in New Orleans.
Oh, yes.
the famous non-call pass interference. Man, he was absolutely outstanding in that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. That one. Yes, he looked great.
Yeah.
No, I mean he's had some real moments where he's looked amazing, and to your point, moments where he looks completely befuddled and lost.
Right.
I do think the running game, I think, for the Lions is going to be big. Like David Montgomery, I like in this game, so I think that helps it.
Any particular props in this game that jump out at you relative to individual players?
Yeah, I mean, I just said it. David Montgomery, I think his rushing yards set at like 41.5. I think that's interesting. Or if you want to get a little spicy, his David Montgomery's receiving yards. Now, 49ers are 8th in the league as far as most receiving yards led up to the running back. He's been running a lot more routes than he has previously past few games. I wouldn't be surprised if they get him going in the passing game. So David Montgomery is kind of the guy I've circled. And then Zach Ertz to get a catch. You can get that at plus 145. So that's kind of a fun Eagles homer play to get him involved, assuming he's active, which we don't know for sure that's going to happen.
If he's active, I mean, what did they sign him for? I mean, you figure one catch. I mean, I have to say that. All right, let's go to Baltimore. Sean Green from the Sports Gambling Podcast. Sean, this game I think has a lot more panache to it. Just a level of quarterbacking alone. You know, you've got Goff versus Purdy, and then you go up 3 flights, and now you have Lamar versus Patty Mahomes. I think the Chiefs come in here real heavy, Sean. I understand though from Sal, the line has actually breached 4.
Yeah.
Why do you think the line is going up, given that the Chiefs are such a heavyweight?
No, it's interesting. I mean, you know, Chiefs, for all their success, you would think would kind of be a public team and would be taking more action, at least here early. It'll be interesting to see like what towards like Saturday, that's when they let the big money loose and they take some high limits, which I'm sure they will be in this game. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of action on the Baltimore Ravens, both the amount of dollars and the number of people putting bets on it. I'm somewhat surprised. I get it. You know, Ravens won by margin against this Texans team, but man, I don't want any part of fading Patrick Mahomes as an underdog, especially. I mean, the intensity of after they won that game, him breaking it down like, hey, this job's not done. We're locked in. And I think they figured out a little bit with their offense there against the Bills. But really, I think it's about this defense. This defense, I think, can kind of give Baltimore a little bit of problems. I like, Spagnuolo has had his ups and downs as a coordinator, but I thought he called a really good game against the Bills last week, limited that no 20-yard plus pass plays or plays in general. So if you can limit some explosive stuff, if you can limit Lamar Jackson. Now, it does seem like Willie Gay, their linebacker, who would probably be the guy to spy Lamar, he's a little banged up, but it does sound like he's going to go. So I like this Chiefs defense to keep them around. And Patrick Mahomes is a dog. I'm not going to overthink it. He's 9-1-1 as a dog. So I'm going to keep looking to that until I start losing money on Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs.
It's hard to believe he's even had 11 games, Sean, but he was an underdog.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I agree. I think you'd have to be very wary of putting money on beating this guy. But are there any props in that game that leap out at you?
Yeah, this one, I actually like Patrick Mahomes rushing yards. It's set at like 27.5. Yeah. And everyone's talking about what a great rusher Lamar is. And certainly no one would say Mahomes is better. But you look at their yards per attempt rushing, it's pretty similar. And in the playoffs, he has shown a willingness to run. That Miami game, he had 41 rush yards. Didn't get there against the Bills, which in some ways is good here because it gives us a lower number to work with. I think he's coming in here, and it's win or go home. I think Patrick Mahomes isn't afraid to scramble. He's healthy. So yeah, I think he gets loose for like 1 or 2 first down pickups, and that's really all you need.
All right. I think it's gonna be a good game.
Yeah,
I think it could really come right down to it. I don't know. Ravens are very good. I mean, very good. But as you pointed out, Chiefs defense underrated, and we'll have to see. And I talked to Sal. I talked to you about it. That I got to believe it when I see it with Jared the Goff. And
yes,
maybe it's the same way with Lamar, though, Sean. I mean, at some point, January Lamar has not been impressive, and I'm just not sure that he's earned that kind of support betting wise for Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quarterback league, right? And Patrick Mahomes' first road playoff game looked calm, cool, composed. I mean, as someone who had money on the Chiefs last week, I was not scared when they had the ball, or the Bills were driving, or if it was going to go to overtime. I still felt really good getting the points and having the Chiefs to win the game. And I feel pretty similar in this same spot to me. I mean, I understand Ravens had a great regular season, nice playoff win against the Texans, but I'm not fading this Chiefs team.
All right, we have 1 minute, Sean. Let me hit you with some lightning round of your own here. The NFL honors, the nominees came out. I'm sure there's all kinds of money you can bet on this stuff too, with all you degenerates. AP most valuable players. Is there any doubt that it's Lamar, Sean?
No, give it to Lamar.
The AP Defensive Player of the Year, Deron Bland. How about that? Bland, yes, he stole. He had a couple pick sixes, but come on, will you stop it? Defensive Player of the Year. Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, T.J. Watt. I say Watt gets it. What do you say?
Yeah, it's going to be Watt. I mean,
I see the same thing there. AP Offensive Player of the Year. If Lamar gets MVP, he's
Christian
not
McCaffrey, probably.
Right? You don't think Dak gets it?
No, well, it is a regular season award.
I know. Yeah.
I think because Christian McCaffrey was legitimately in the mix for MVP, they'll end up giving it to him. So
I think so. And they're probably sensitive to the fact that quarterbacks just own MVP awards. So you're probably right about that. And then give me one. AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. Tell me my boy Puka is going to win that award.
Oh man, so many people were tweeting at me, those last final weeks, like, hey, I have a Puka Nacua 100-1 ticket. Should I hedge? And I was telling most of them, like, yeah, because if the Texans get in the playoffs, CJ Stroud's going to win it. I mean, he's a rookie quarterback with a rookie head coach who won their division, and I think he'll secretly, even though it is a regular season award, I think he'll get credit for that playoff win as well. So
I think
it's a QB league, but I mean, you got to feel good about the Rams. Like, they killed the draft with Puka in the 5th round, some of the defensive players they got in the 3rd round. Like, they're set up pretty good as long as Stafford can stay healthy.
There you go, Sean.
They got another year or two of a window here.
I think so. All right, Sean Green, where does everybody find you on Vision, I guess, and everywhere else? Where do people track you down this weekend for some last-minute directions?
VSiN Friday nights, 9:00 Pacific, midnight East. And, Sports Gambling Podcast all week. Just toss it in your Google. Can't miss us.
Make sure you follow at Sean T. Green. He's a great follow on X. And I'll tell you, the guy posts all kinds of information for free right on X. So check it out. I don't know why Sean does that. I'll talk about that after. Maybe I can bucks off. But Sean, thank you very much, and I look forward to. I do want to have you back as we get into the Super Bowl.
Let's get it.
All right, Sean Green, thanks a lot, pal. All right, Sean Green joining me. When we get back, I'm going to rip a little bit. I just want to talk about. We're going to have Mike Lombardi on. Mike couldn't make it tonight, so I thought I would talk about maybe a little stock up, stock down. We'll go through the NFL. And who off the regular season and the early part of the off season, what team stock is clearly heading up, what team stock is clearly heading down. We'll go through that all next on a championship edition of This Week in Pro Football presented by Kennedy Ford.
I got everything you need.
Anything can happen when you go live.
I got everything you need. No trouble, don't need a thing. Snap your fingers and I'm on the scene.
Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia, voted best casino in Pennsylvania.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
John Kennedy Ford. Their reputation sounded too good to be true, so my partner and I decided to do a little digging.
They know we can see them, right?
We could get them a great deal if they just come inside.
They made us. Run!
Uncovering a better car buying experience is easy at John Kennedy Ford. Enjoy your ride.
Johnny Apple's Restaurant and Bar opened in 2001 and for over 20 years has been serving great food and good times to Bucks County residents, friends, and family. Ideally located at 184 Buck Road in Holland, Johnny Apple's offers a terrific array of steaks, seafood, and daily specials. They also host private parties and affairs of any size. For excellent food, great company, and a relaxed lunch or dinner, check out Johnny Apple's Restaurant at 215-953-9900 or at johnnyapplesrestaurant.com.
Welcome back to Speak of Pro Football. It's still an offensive coordinator league. I've been looking at the list of the new head coaches that have been hired. Now, Raheem Morris, he's defensive coordinator, so I guess I got to give you that. Antonio Pierce hired in Vegas as the head coach after a one-season audition. He's a defensive guy, but still, Brian Callahan, the Bengals offensive coordinator for the last 5 years, is now the head coach in Tennessee. And Dave Canales, who was 1 year as the head coach, the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, but did a heck of a job with Baker Mayfield, is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. So it's all that Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, what I call coaching tree there. That is, everybody still wants to find those young geniuses, those young guys in the John Gruden mold who are going to work 115 hours a week and design all these bizarre offenses to take the league by storm. And that doubles down on the Eagles' issue now. Who are they going to fill that offensive coordinator spot with? Are they going to be able to mine or find someone like that? Sal Paolantonio's point is no. Go get a seasoned guy, a guy that's going to be able to eyeball Jalen Hurts and tell him, no, we're going to do it this way. And that's a very interesting dynamic here. We'll see how that works out. We'll talk to Sal about that next week. Talk to Tim McManus about that in just a few minutes. But for now, what I thought we'd do, Xander, if you bring up that standings, this is the final standings for the year. I just thought we'd run down the two conferences and maybe talk about a little stock up, stock down here as we head into the 24 season. It's never too early to start ruminating about this stuff. I didn't mention, as far as the NFC is concerned on the left there, I didn't say stock up or down for Dallas or Philadelphia. Now, some might have a different opinion, but I think both of those ships can still be righted. Dallas is a relatively young team. They do have some talent. They just can't get over the hump. They can't do it. But I think the jury's out there. I think the jury's out in Philadelphia. I think they can certainly snap back. The Eagles still have a core of talent. Sal is right. They've got to solve now the gaping problem at center. Forget the Giants and the Commanders. I'm not drinking any of that. I did say stock up, though. In the NFC North is going to become a powerful division. I think Detroit, the stock is definitely up there. A young team. They are way, way below the cap. They're number one, according to Sport Rack, in terms of the salary cap. The Detroit Lions have a ton of room under the cap. I shouldn't have said number one, though. The Lions are not number one, but they're number 7. Total cap space of $61 million. Detroit is going to be formidable. Green Bay, very formidable. The Packers, not as much cap room, but Packers are an extremely young team, but they have mined a lot of talent there. And man, oh man, you got to give the Packers credit for the way they hit on quarterbacks. They hit on quarterbacks the way the Pittsburgh Steelers hit on head coaches. But I tell you, I wouldn't sleep on the Bears either. I think the Bears, the stock is up on them. They have a ton of draft capital. The question with the Bears is, what are they going to do with Justin Fields? Bears could use that number 1 pick they have. They have the overall number 1. It's not even theirs. Carolina's pick on Caleb Williams, the kid out of Southern Cal. And then they could enjoy 4 years of a very, very controlled quarterback salary there. And they could move Justin Fields. That would be a gutsy thing to do. Wouldn't be popular in the locker room. We'll see what the Bears do with that overall number 1 pick. I think the Rams, as Sean Green was mentioning, I think the stock is up on the Rams. A lot of young talent there. But Only 2 years max of Matt Stafford. Well, at max. I'd be surprised, really, he goes more than one. In the stock down, I don't know. I mentioned Dallas. They could go. Is the window closing on Dallas? I'd say no, not yet. But there's some work to do with Dak Prescott. I mean, I kid Lamar Jackson, January Lamar. January Dak is a mess. And his performance against Green Bay was just terrible. So some work's got to get done there. But the other two NFC teams, I think, stock down, Minnesota and New Orleans. I think Minnesota needs to rebuild now. They're going to fall to the bottom of that division. They got to decide what to do with Kirk Cousins. They have nothing else at quarterback. And the New Orleans Saints, they're an aging defense, and there's just a ceiling with Derek Carr. I'm sorry. There is a ceiling, and it is not a Super Bowl ceiling with Derek Carr. The Saints have some machinations to do, but they're in a very weak division. In the AFC, stock up and stock down. And stock up for me, how about those New York Jets? Now, the Jets got sabotaged 4 plays into the season when they lost Aaron Rodgers. But the Jets have a lot of young talent. If they can coax a full year out of Rodgers, like I mentioned with the Rams, they get a year or 2 out of Rodgers. The Jets will be a playoff team next year. I think the Ravens, I say stock up on the Ravens. They might be the best team in the league, and the stock is still up. They just have an excellent coach, an excellent front office, an excellent eye for talent, and they play hard. The Ravens play hard. You never catch the Ravens on a bad day. And we'll see how they do in the AFC title game. But I think the stock's almost always up in Baltimore. And then the Houston Texans, stock is up with them. They're going to be a tough out, I think. As I've said before, I mean, 20 years of top 5 draft picks, it's about time. But they hit with this kid at quarterback. I mean, this kid is really going to be good. So if the Texans can build any type of a really good defense, they're going to be a tough out. And they're going to start to dominate that division. Stock down in the AFC. Look at the Buffalo Bills. They were 6-6. They won their last 5 games to win the division. They won their first playoff game, and then they lost a crusher to Kansas City. I think the window's closing in Buffalo. I really do. I think they may have reached as far as they're going to go with Sean McDermott. And I think defensively they got some rebuilding to do. That was a veteran defense. And they're going to have to start over there. And they've used up 6-7 years now of this kid's talent and all-world talent at quarterback, Josh Allen. Patriots are a complete mess. They're a complete mess. Bill Belichick has left. I think that cupboard is bare. I think Jared Mayo is in some serious trouble as far as putting together a real winning team in New England. They're a few years away. And the other stock down, I think, is Jacksonville. We've heard this, haven't we? Haven't we heard this for years now, that the Jaguars have a lot of talent? The Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, and they're up and coming, and 9-8. I think there's a ceiling on Trevor Lawrence. I think the Texans have passed them. So I don't see much coming out of Jacksonville. That's just a little stock up, stock down there going into the 2024 season. All right, listen, we get back here in just a couple minutes. My buddy Tim McManus from ESPN is going to join me. We're going to talk more about that Eagle press conference, about where this team is headed. We'll do that next. To wrap up this week at Pro Football on a Championship Edition here, presented by Kennedy Ford.
Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated, the concrete cutting specialists in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. These guys are celebrating their 28th anniversary as the industry leader in the field of concrete cutting and robotic demolition. Any type of concrete cutting or drilling, concrete demolition or interior excavating, call the specialists. Concrete Cutting Systems. They're the only full union concrete cutting company based in Philadelphia. Call the guys today at 215-533-0652. The website is concretecuttingsystems.net. Let's go Eagles.
Evolution Energy Partners has helped hundreds of businesses save millions of dollars on their energy spend. They offer electricity and gas procurement strategies, efficiency audits and engineering and financing solutions, as well as online utility bill management. To learn how your business can save, visit www.evolutionep.com or contact Chuck Herschella at 610-329-8288. Evolution Energy Partners, energy solutions to improve your bottom line.
here this week in pro football. By the way, Sean Green was presented by the good folks at Live Hotel and Casino, Philadelphia. So you can always check them out. How about we check this guy out? This guy is just joining me right now. It looks like a rock star there. It would be from ESPN, the Eagles correspondent for ESPN, the great Tim McManus. Timmy Mac, how you doing?
What do you mean looks like a rock star?
I mean, he looked like Johnny Cash here with all that, but he got the black on. It looks pretty good.
All right. Thank you. How you doing?
All right. Tim, you were right at the center of that press conference. Sal Paolantonio was talking about it, and even Xander, our producer, said you were the one asking the really toughest questions. I want to start with this one, all right? And that is the dynamic between Harry Roseman and Nick Sirianni. How do you see it? I mean, do you see this as a successful partnership?
I mean, if we're looking at the history of the partnership, I would say yes to that. The fact that they've gotten to the playoffs 3 times, Pat, in as many years and got to the Super Bowl, that was just last February, even though it kind of feels like a world away. It hasn't even been a full year yet. And it does seem like there has been, a compatibility there between the two of them. Now, I will say that this is the first bit of real adversity that they've hit. And I think that we've seen from the franchise in the past that when adversity hits, then maybe not all the boats will be, going in the same direction. So it's yet to be determined whether it has staying power. But at least from where I sit right now, it seems to work pretty well, where Roseman gets to do what he likes to do. He's very much involved. He's got full control of personnel. Sirianni has just essentially stayed in the coaching lane. And to that point, I think it's worked for both parties.
All right. You asked in the press conference, I spent some time talking with Sal Paolantonio about this, about the fact, okay, they've hired Vic Fangio. I'm not excited about that hire, Tim. I'd like to get your opinion on that. But also, they haven't yet hired the OC. And I think that is a much more tricky position for the Eagles to fill. I'd like your opinion on that. And as you mentioned at the press conference, with Sirianni coming up year 4 of a 5-year deal, how difficult do you think it's going to be to fill that job at a high-quality level?
It's a really good question, Pat, because everybody sees what's going on, right? I mean, you're coming off of an extremely turbulent year. The offensive coordinator got fired. The defensive coordinator got fired. It took 9 days until they addressed the media, which tells you that they were working through a lot of things behind the scenes. And so if you're a potential offensive coordinator candidate, you look at that and you recognize that, yeah, I mean, that maybe it's going to be a short shelf life. I guess that's also kind of the way of the NFL. And I think I saw a stat that every offensive coordinator that's currently placed in the NFL started at 2022 or later. So it's not like it's not like there's not a lot of turnover there anyway. And I think part of the key is going to be, what are the Eagles offering? And from what I could tell from Sirianni's comments, they're offering a significant amount of power. Sirianni said something that he had never said during any of his press conferences, and that's that the new offensive coordinator is going to be in charge of the offense. We already know that means play calling. Sirianni doesn't do that. And it sounds like the new OC will be able to create the offense, at least in part, in his vision. So I would imagine that, plus the fact that you get to work with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, a good offensive line. Maybe that helps counterbalance some of the other stuff.
All right. But you're right, though. I was talking about that earlier in the show. Dave Canales, hired by Carolina 1 year in Tampa Bay. And then Brian Callahan. Now, he was 5 years at Cincinnati. I guess you could say he paid his dues. But that's the head coach that most owners are looking for, that resume. So you're right. You're right about that. But all right. Now, let's talk about the OC. You mentioned getting to the guys that he gets to work with. Just Jalen Hurts for a second. Do you see that as a positive? Do you think there's any reservation out there amongst potential offensive coordinators about working with Hurts? He's just so quiet. He's so steadfast. He's so reserved. Do you perceive maybe that there might be some unwillingness to work with an offensive coordinator there?
Not that I've picked up on. I mean, as Hertz said at his last press conference, some of the things that people used to say were strengths of mine are now being turned into a weakness. And so he's got this stoic demeanor, and he's a workmanlike person, who is all about his business. And when he was almost the MVP, that was like, look at this guy, mature beyond his years,
Right.
the leader of leaders. And then they lose 6 or 7. It's like, who is, this guy's got to.
That's an excellent point. You're right. You're certainly right about that. I mentioned earlier in the show, Tim, it kind of reminds me of Carson Wentz. And everybody loved Wentz. He was the greatest thing ever in Philadelphia. And then all of a sudden, hey, Carson, here's a bus ticket. And so you're right. But it's a tough crowd. So you're certainly right about that. But what about Sirianni, though, Tim? You mentioned that he's going to give the offensive coordinator a lot of power. He hires Vic Fangio. I'm not excited about Fangio's resume. I mentioned 177 and 191 in 23 years, just in terms of the teams he was on. And most of his percentiles are in the middle relative to relative defensive performance. But still, Sirianni's not going to be able to coach him, I don't think. So if he gives the offensive coordinator a lot of power and he's got Vic Fangio, what the hell's Nick Sirianni going to do for a living?
Well, that was my question to Sirianni. And he said, I'm going to be the head coach, and that means that maybe I'll sit in more defensive meetings, and I'm essentially going to be a culture builder and a culture maintainer. So I think, if you look around the way that different teams are structured, like there are CEO head coaches, right, Pat? I mean, there are guys who just kind of like Dan Campbell is one, Harbaugh is one. So some successful ones where they delegate for the most part. I think the key difference is, well, 2 things. Number one, when I think CEO head coach, I don't think Nick Sirianni, in the fact that he's mercurial. He's volatile.
Excellent point. You're right.
So that's not really what I think of as a CEO. And I would say that the second part is that most of the designs that are out there where the guys are the CEO, it was kind of built that way. Whereas in this case, Sirianni either, willingly gave up the offensive control, or he was told to give up the offensive control after a disastrous finish. In other words, this is a result of really desperation. So I think we need to make that clear. Like, yes, there are other builds that look like this build now, but not because of the same circumstances.
All right, fair enough. Talking with Tim McManus here from ESPN. Timmy, the Eagles, I mentioned earlier, they have about $29 million of available cap space going into 2024. How active do you see the Eagles being in the free agent market when that starts in March?
I think they need to get after that defense pretty quick, to state the obvious here, Pat. I mean, and one thing, if you look at those Fangio defenses, like he has had really good linebacker play with Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman and Roquan Smith. A lot of times, like his most successful defenses is when the linebacker position was pretty stout. And as we know in Philly, that is not the case. They allocated $8 million to off-ball linebackers this year, and the league average is $22 million. So that's 60-some-odd% below the mean for how they invest in linebackers, and that's year after year after the year. And this year, being at the extreme, really bit them. I do believe that Roseman's going to make a tweak to that. I'm not expecting him to totally change his philosophy, but obviously you need to get better at the linebacker position. And really, you can name every level of that defense, can't you? And say corners, yes. Safeties, yes. Defensive line, yes. And linebacker, yes. And so, they can't go big splash crazy, but they can make some impact moves, particularly on the defensive side of the ball to get better there.
Yeah, and they have 2 free agents in the linebacking core, Zach Cunningham, Shaq Leonard. Leonard did not make anywhere, Tim, near the splash that I think was anticipated. Do you see the Eagles trying to re-sign either of those 2 guys?
Maybe Cunningham, if the price is right. I mean, Roseman went out of his way to talk about Cunningham during that press conference yesterday. And so I could see that as a possibility. They're definitely high on the Kobe Dean. How much they're willing to risk it on Dean is a different question. I mean, but when you're standing around him, you can see why he does exude this, this leadership about him that almost reminds me, it's not quite at that level, but almost reminds me of D'Amico Ryans. Like when I'm around him, I'm like, I get it. When I talk to him, I understand why they're high on this guy. But the size was a little bit of a concern, and the injury history was a little bit of a concern coming out of college. and now you've seen the 2 foot injuries. I don't know that that's something that you need to have a backup plan, essentially, to make sure that you're not in the same position you are from last year at linebacker.
Right. One last Eagle question, Tim. Then I want to ask your opinion on the 2 conference title games. But, okay, the Eagles, after a 10-1 start, we all know they crashed and burned. Now, Jeff Lurie has made it clear, right, Tim, that he's not happy with the way that unfolded. Do you see both of these guys, Sirianni and Roseman, as on a very short leash heading into 2024?
I mean, I feel like the seat is hot for Sirianni.
Right.
Once your coordinators, are gone, there's like, who's next, right? I mean, there's nobody else to point the finger to at this point. So clearly, the way that it's structured, the onus is on Sirianni. It's harder to say with Roseman. I mean, it's just year after year, Pat. He finds a way to stay firmly entrenched in that organization, and so he had a down year. But I think if Lurie looks at it, says, "All right, the overall product has been good. Talent, generally speaking, was not the issue, and hasn't really been the issue the last couple of years." So I feel comfortable saying this is a warm seat for Sirianni, but until I see other evidence, I can't really say the same for Roseman quite yet.
All right. You mentioned Tim wrote an excellent piece on ESPN.com. I want everybody to check it out about this, about the conference. And there was one quote that you mentioned here from Sirianni. I just want to say what Sirianni said. "I know when I have that connection with the guys on the football team, that's when the culture is working at a high level." Well, how do you think the players are now with it? Do you think they're just still like, hey, Nick, you go solve the problem. Just tell us what to do and we'll do it. Or do you think they can rally around this guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of the people that I've talked to like Nick and respect Nick, and they like his messaging. They like the fact that he does stress connecting. So I think he does have that element. Clearly, the X's and O's weren't up to snuff this year, Pat, and it was his offense, and they know that. And so, what really wins players over? Like, they want to be able to be maximized. They want to win, and they want to personally be maximized. So they can make a living, and so they can look good, and they can make money and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So part's
That's
missing.
right. Yep.
That's tough.
Yeah.
So they need to get that part right. And that's maybe some of the reason why they're delegating offensive responsibilities away from Sirianni, so they can get that fresh approach. But the bottom line is if they don't feel like they're being put in a good position out there, then that's going to put Sirianni in a tenuous place.
All right, fair enough. All right, Tim, let me give you your chance here. Seasoned football guy that you are, you've seen these teams all season long. Just give me a couple sentence take on each of the conference championship games. Detroit and San Francisco. You know me, I'm not a big Jared Goff guy. Do you think he can actually steal a win out there?
I don't know if I'm thinking clearly on this one. I want Detroit. Come on.
Yeah.
Give the city a little something. I mean, do you see the way they're celebrating these playoff wins, which have been so hard to come by? So that's where the heart is. The head is probably more towards San Francisco at home. The defense against Jared Goff outdoors. Probably lean San Fran there.
Yeah, I hate the 49ers, Tim. I can't stand. So yeah, I'll be a big Lion fan this Sunday. I think the more competitive, and I was saying earlier, the difference at quarterback level, where you have Mahomes against Lamar versus us compared to Jared versus Brock Purdy. The AFC Championship game, a lot of glitz and glamour in that game. How do you lean on that one?
All the hair pulling over Kansas City, and they just get right at the right time. I mean, Andy Reid, year after year, it's unbelievable. And they're hard to go against. But I think that they're running into a buzzsaw.
Yeah.
Ravens are the best team in football, right? I mean, they just have shown that week in and week out. Where's the weakness? You know that Lamar Jackson has to prove it, but he's the MVP of the league. He's got to be. They can run it. They play physical defense. It seems like the recipe for postseason success is exactly how they're constructed. So I like Baltimore to advance.
No. So, I mean, I thought all along, Tim, I said at the start of the playoffs, I thought it'd be a chalk Super Bowl. I thought, the 2 number 1 seeds go, and I think that's the way it's going to turn out. But I think I would never put money against Patty Mahomes. I mean, I just wouldn't. I mean, that guy is unbelievable. So I think they've got a puncher's chance because number 15 is that good. But I do think you're right. I think that'd be the 2-1 seeds in a very unlikable Super Bowl. What are you going to do, Tim? That's the way. Tim, listen, I appreciate you taking this time. Thank you very much. It was great insight on that press conference and the like. Thanks for joining me as many times as you did this season. And I look forward, of course, to having you back next year for another season of the team that just dominates the airwaves in Philadelphia. All right.
Appreciate you, and I'll get back to my rock concert now.
All right, Tim. Thanks very much, pal. All right, that was a great Tim McManus joining me to wrap up a championship week of This Week in Pro Football. An interesting week here in Philadelphia, and it's not over yet. They got to fill that OC job. We'll see what happens there. And we'll take a look at these two conference championship games. We'll be back next week to preview, obviously, the Super Bowl and look back again at what's been a pretty fascinating playoff run. Thanks very much to Xander Kraus for producing. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, give me a follow at TWIPF Pat on X. You can follow the network at JAKIB Sports. We will talk to you next week, pre-Super Bowl edition of This Week of Pro Football.